This is Gemara in Nazir, Daf Beis, Baruch Hashem. We begin another incredible Masechta together. I appreciate everyone that reached out with the wonderful emails. And as always, we begin with a tefillah that the same excitement, vigor, and gishmak that we have today when we begin a new Masechta should ultimately carry us through the entire Masechta, aiding in the clarity, aiding in understanding the Gemaras, and ultimately learning and growing together each and every day. So, Nazir Daf Beis, the one word of Akdama that we're going to say is that in some level, we're continuing Nidarim. As we're going to see very quickly, and in reality, we saw at the end of a Nidarim how Nazir is a form of a Neder, and therefore we're going to be very familiar with a lot of the concepts B'siyata Dishmaya that we're going to see. So the Mishnah begins, and the truth is, today's daf, many people will feel, wait, this sounds familiar. That's because if you flip back in your Nadarim to Daf Beis, it's almost a carbon copy Gemara. So, with those words, let's get to it. Says the Mishnah, Kol kinuye nizirais kiniziris. The kinuyim, the kinuy is a nickname, the equivalent name of a Nazir is like the Naziris. And now the Mishnah continues, not with explaining what the kinuyim are, but rather the Mishnah continues with explaining the yadais. When you say something which is not the precise words of the neder, of the Nazir, but means the same. Says the Mishnah, ha'omer ehei. If someone says, I shall be, and he doesn't say what he should be. Says the Mishnah, Harei a Nazir. He has a din of a Nazir. Now, what exactly does that mean? Why? I just say I should be, it makes me a Nazir. Of course, the Gemara is going to discuss. Or if someone says I should be beautiful, I should be handsome. Again, Nazir, he is a Nazir. Now the Mishnah continues. So part A of the Mishnah was the nicknames are the same status of the Nazir. Part B was we morphed from nicknames from Kinuyim to Yadais to things which were not so clear that it meant Nazir. Now part C goes back to part A, goes back to the din of Kinuyim. Nazik, Naziach, Poziach. If someone says any of these words, Harei is a Nazir, he has the status of a Nazir. Continues the Mishnah. Hareini koze. If someone says, I am like this, Hareini, excuse me, we're having a little bit of an issue with our Gemara over here. Here it is. Hareini koze. Someone says, Hareini koze, I should be like this. Hareini misalsel. Or if he says, I should be a mitzalsel, hareini mechalkel. Or he says, I should be a mechalkel, harei alay l'shaleach pera. Or if he says, I should have to grow my hair, harei zen nazir. These are all forms of saying harei zen nazir. Harei alay tzipoirim. Someone says, there should be birds upon me, ramir nazir, v'chachamim oimrim, Einoi Nazir. Amir says he is. The Chachamim say he is not. Now, one more word of Akdama. As you see on the right side of your page, this looks like Rashi. And over here, you don't have a mysterious word Rashi on the top. So is it really Rashi? So we have to just understand the Masechta that we are learning. We go down to the Gilyon Hashas over here. We'll zoom it in so everyone can see it nice and clear. Says the Gilyon Hashas, quoting the Chidah, B'sefer Shema Gideon Lagoyin Merechayim Yosef David Azulai use the Chida. Ba'is Shin Kasav it says B'Shema Ravian Malachi the Pirush Nazir Einoi Mirashi. That this is not really Rashi. So, similar to Nidarim, in which we learned to the Ran, over here we're often going to go into Taisvis with explanations, but for now we're going to look in what is seemingly Rashi. It's not really Rashi, as we just said, but just one very interesting line over here in the third narrow line. He says that the word Nazik, Naziach, and Paziach are all of them, because if you erase one letter of it, it becomes a Nazir. If you erase the leg of the kuf, so in your nazik, you get rid of that leg, what are you left with? Nazir, the nazik. V'doifen ches, the naziach, you get rid of one line of the ches, you have Nazir, and as well, the gagoy, the pei, the paziach, and the doifen cheshabai, it makes it into Nazir. So that's why these are all forms of kinuyim, as they could be morphed into the word Nazir. So our Mishnah basically teaching us two basic dinim, the din of kinuyim and the din of Yadais, that the kinuyim, the nicknames, have a status of Naziris as well as the Yadais. So before we get into the Mishnah itself, in the formation of the Mishnah, and the interesting form, the A, the B, the C, going back to A, says the Gemara, what in the world is Nazir doing? Michli Tana B'Seder Nashim Kai. We're middle of learning Nashim. Believe it or not, maybe you don't even remember that because of Nedarim. So my time, what is the reason? Tanir Nazir. We learn Ksubis. We're going to learn Gittin soon enough. We're going to learn Saita. What in the world is Nazir sandwiched in the middle? Answers the Gemara, Tana Akrai Kai. The Tana is going on the pasuk that says, "V'hayam lo yisib zachein be'inav." If one does not find favor in her eyes, why? Ki matzav ervas davar. Because he finds an ervas davar, he suspects his wife of adultery, of zinos. So within nashim, within the sugya of marriage, the Torah says, if you find something less than desirable, you find and you suspect a form of zinos, and on that point, v'hachi ka'amar, and this is what it's teaching us. Mi garem lo la'avera. What causes the avera? What causes one to be mezaneh? Yayin, wine. V'ka'amar, and therefore by putting Nazir over here, you know what the Gemara, Ravina and Rav Ashi are teaching us? Kol ha'araya saita b'kol kula. If someone sees a saita in her defamation, in her disgrace, someone sees a saita, one who is accused of being mezaneh, sees her blowing up, yazir atzma min hayayin. If you see something, you take it to heart, you see what the perils of wine could be, you see how far one could fall in sin, that one could go and sleep with another man, and this woman blows up, what do? You internalize it. How do you do that? You make yourself into a Nazir. You say, I'm done with this thing called wine. I don't want to have anything to do with it. So if someone is put in a situation in which they see something, you internalize it, you allow it to factor into your own personal life. So why is Nazir in the middle of Nashim? Because Nashim deals with marriage. Sometimes in marriage there's a suspicion of zinos. What causes the zinos? The wine. And if you see this site, you have to make yourself a Nazir. Therefore, within Nashim, it is quite appropriate, says the Gemara, to do what? To teach us the halachos of Nazir. So that's what the Masechta is doing over here. Okay, so now that we know what the Masechta is doing here, says the Gemara, let's dive into the Mishnah. Let's understand the formation of the Mishnah. Pasach b'kinuyin u'mefarish yadais. The Mishnah begins, called kinuyin naziris, his kids and naziris. And then the Mishnah continues, hey, which is a form of a yad, a form of an unclear statement. So what's going on in the Mishnah? It starts telling me this is what a kinui is, and then it explains a yad. Why doesn't the Mishnah explain what a kinui is? So Amar Rava v'itei makti. Some say it was Rava, and some say it was an unnamed Tana. Chasuri mechsor v'achigatani. The classical words missing in the Mishnah. You have to read the Mishnah as follows. Kol kinui naziris is kinazirais, and v'yadais nazirais kinazirais. You add that line in. And kino, you have naziris is like nazirais, and the yad of nazirais has the same status of nazirais. And then once we're discussing yadais, ve'elu ein yadais. So once we bring down the topic of yadais, so the Mishnah continues, and the Mishnah says, and these are the yadais. Ha'omer, for example, if someone says, hey, harei zeh nazir. So because the Mishnah begins with kinuyim, and then the Mishnah continues with, one second, and then the Mishnah continues saying the line that we're inserting is that the yadais are also like naziris. Now that we brought down yadais, the Mishnah explains the yadais. Asks the Gemara the obvious question, V'lifroish kinoi bereisha. Why don't we first explain the kinuyim? It says kinuyim, then it says yadais. So why do we explain yadais? First explain kinuyim. Answers the Gemara, Tana me'ahu disalik Ahu mefarish bereisha. The Tana is of the opinion that which we write second, that which we just finished saying, that's what which we explain. If I tell you A and then B, I explain B and then A. Where do we have a precedent of this? And this reminds us of Nedarim Daf Beis Kidetanan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Ba'amem alikin v'ba'im alikin. With what can you light on Shabbos, and with what can you not light? Umefarish, and the Gemara in Shabbos explains Ein ma'alikin bereisha, explains B before A. Similarly, with what are you allowed to do atmana? With what are you allowed to hide the food to keep it warm on Shabbos? What are you not allowed to do atmana? Umefarish ein taimnim bereisha. Similarly, what is a woman allowed to carry on Shabbos? What is a woman not allowed to carry on Shabbos? So three sources in which the Gemara explains B before A, and that concurs with our Mishnah that explains B, that explains the Yadais before A. But asks the Gemara on the fourth line before the white lines, Vatanan, what about the Mishnah that says, what is an animal allowed to carry on Shabbos? Umefarish, and then what does it explain? Yoitze Gamel Bereisha. It explains A. It explains that which you're allowed to go out. It doesn't explain B. Similarly, the Gemara Baba Basra, Yesh Noichlen Umanchilin, there are those that inherit and bequeath. Noichlen v'loy manchilin, there are those that inherit and don't bequeath. Manchilin v'loy noichlen, there are those that bequeath and don't inherit. Loy noichlen v'loy manchilin, and then there are some that don't need, that neither bequeath nor inherit. Umefarish, and what does the Gemara and Baba Basra explain? We would anticipate B, the last thing, but it doesn't do that. Umefarish elu noichlen umanchilin bereisha. So ask the Gemara, I don't understand. You're telling me an idea that if I have A and then I have B, I have kinuyim and then I have the yadais. We first explain B, we first explain yadais, but we see countless times that the Shas doesn't do that. Answers the Gemara, Ella la'olam. You know what I'll tell you? Tini hachi utini hachi. Says the Gemara, in reality, it could go either. In reality, it could go either way. And therefore, we see throughout Shas sometimes like this, and sometimes like that. Elahasam, in the three cases in which we brought down, including our Mishnah, in the three cases that we brought down, in which we explained B before A, the Isur didn't have Sheyu. The reason is because it's an Isur applying to the person. Mifarish Isur didn't have Shei Bereisha. We explained the Isur of the person first. Whereas the other cases that we brought down, over there, the Isser is not on himself. It's an Isser by way of the animal Udasi. Therefore, Mefaresh Hatera Bereisha. When it's discussing the person himself, we deal with the Isser. When it discusses an animal, we're comfortable dealing with the Heter. And we turn over to Beis Amid Beis. And the Gemara continues and explains that 1 second. What about in the case of Noichlen Umanchilin? What about the Gemara in Baba Basra? Over there, seemingly, it does not fit the bill. It does not conform with the rules that we just explained. So says the Gemara, Gabi Yesh Noichlen. When it comes to Yesh Neichlin, when it comes to the Gemara in Baba Basra, Nami Mefaresh Iker, it explains the main din Nachla Bereisha, the din of Nachla first, and that's why it does it. Basically, what we're seeing over here is there's no ironclad rule. It goes B, then A, and then B, but rather we go with whatever the appropriate circumstances are. When it's an Isser din Avshei, that comes first. With an Isser of the Behema, then the Heter comes first. When it comes to Yesh Neichlin, then we say the Iker din first. So now that we explained everything, so the question is, let's go full circle. And what's going on in our Mishnah? So why in our Mishnah does it not explain kinuyim first? I don't understand. Kinuyim would be more the standard case, the nickname of a Nazir, and then it should go into the not standard case. Then it should go into the partial cases. Answers the Gemara, Elahainu tam yadais. What's the reason we explain yadais first? Hayal va'asin la midrasha, since we learn it out of a drasha, chavivin lei, that which we learn out of a drasha is more chaviv to us. So says the Gemara, beautiful. So that's why we say Yadais first. But ask Gemara 1 second, if it's so chaviv lichla b'haim bereisha, so why don't we start with Yadais? Why don't we start kol kinuye nazirais? Why don't we just start right away with Yadais? Answers the Gemara, Tanaki maschil be'ikar carbon. When we start with the ikar, the main halacha of Naziros, which is kinuyim. Ula inyan pirushe, but then when we're explaining mefarish yodais bereisha, that is more dear to us because we learned it out from a drasha. Continues the Gemara about 7 lines down. The 2 dots, continuing the Mishnah, the next part of the Mishnah dealt with Yadais. Hoi merehei areze Nazir. So when we learned this in the Mishnah, we said we were going to explain how we exactly know that. Someone says, I will be, means you're Nazir. How in the world does I will be mean I will be a Nazir? Says the Gemara, Dilma, perhaps, hey b'tainis ka'amar. Maybe it means I'll be in tainis, I'll fast. Amar Shmuel, and of course it's very familiar from that which we learned in Nidarim, says Shmuel, Kigoin, Sheya Nazir Iver Lefanav. The case is there's a Nazir passing by, and he says, I should be. So no, we know what his intent is. I should be like that person. I should be a Nazir. Ask the Gemara, Lema Kasavar Shmuel, Yodayin Sheinu Nechichais, Loyhave Yodayin. From here, do we have a proof that Shmuel's of the opinion that if you say something that is not perfectly clear, it does not have a din of a neder, it's not a yadayim, and that's the reason, that's the only case that we could find, is that a Nazir is passing by? Answers the Gemara, no. Amri, they say, Bizman Nazir over Lefanov. When a Nazir is passing by, Lekalis Fuka b'milsa achrina, then there's nothing else to be misubig about what else he meant, because since he said a hey as a Nazir is passing by, he clearly meant I should be a Nazir. Aval vadai eina Nazir over lefanov, but in a scenario when a Nazir is not passing, and he says, excuse me, and he says, hey, Amrinan, we say, Dilma, hey, betainis kamar. Maybe that's what he meant. And therefore, the reason the Mishnah explained the case that Nazir has to be passing, because that's the case which is conclusive. Ask the Gemara 1 second. How do we know that when the Nazir is passing by that his intent is to be a Nazir? Maybe he means I should be like him, meaning I'll bring the karbanos like him. I'm going to work for him. This guy is a Nazir. This guy's obligated to bring a carbon. Maybe what he means is I'll bring it for him. Answers the Gemara, no, the case is that he explains to us that in his mind he was thinking, I want to be a Nazir. Says the Gemara, so now we go full circle. There's a Nazir passing by. He says he's thinking, I want to be a Nazir. So what's the Chiddush? It's Pashit. Answers the Gemara, I would think that maybe you need his mouth and his heart, his thoughts, and his mouth to be equal. And over here, since it was not, maybe it will not be Nazirus, Kamash Malan. So therefore the Mishnah teaches us that even though it's not Bivali by Shaving, because he said an ambiguous statement, it's enough to say that I'll yes be a Nazir, and B'siyata Dishmaya, we'll pick up from the 2 dots to the next year, Daf Gimel of Nazir, tomorrow in Mirza Hashem.